there was a lot of racial division where I grew up in a small country town in Jasper. Uh, Growing up there, it was basically sports and school, and then you go home to your community. I grew up in a kind of a country, really kind of off dirt road type of area where it wasn't a lot of, I don't know, inner city. Well, it was basically in the inner city for the most part. But anyway, it was different. It was a couple of things that you didn't want to, date somebody of the opposite color. I'd say that. That was shunned. Because I actually tried to do that I think it was my junior year in high school, and the young lady told me, like, you can't come over to my house, you can't come to any dinners or anything like that, which was fine. That probably would have been the case on my end as well, but it was just very, it was different. But fortunately for me, I was able to develop some friends of the opposite color, and it kind of helped me see my community and my world in a different light, and it helped me get out of the city to where I was able to get a scholarship, and I was able to, kind of change my worldview. It helped me, just gave me a lot of different exposure to different things in society. So, fortunately, even in the midst of a crazy city and a crazy atmosphere, a community, it ended up being a very, very positive thing in my life personally. So, I don't know. It was just a weird dynamic, but it was also a great thing at the same time. So,
could you guesstimate percentages of an ethnic background? I think we're more familiar with what's at JHS. What would you say was kind of the percentage breakdown for you?
Honestly, it was about 50-50.
Was it? Okay.
It really was. It wasn't the students. We collaborated just kind of like you guys. We collaborated and worked with one another a lot better than our parents did and our grandparents. It's crazy because my grandma, my grandpa's mom, so my great-grandma is half white and half Indian, okay? And her husband, my great-grandma's husband was, he was black as my pants. All right, so they got married and had my grandpa, so he's like, I don't know what you say, a quarter or a third, however you want to put it, white. So I just grew up in a different dynamic a little bit than a lot of my friends, but at the same time, it was I don't want to say like the old time segregation, but it was different.
Kind of on the edge of society, being different, because I'm not married to anyone who speaks Spanish or is Hispanic or Latino. What place do I have in teaching Spanish, as an Asian woman? Well, because I like it. That's why. I'm passionate about it. I love the cultures because I want to do it, not because anyone else dictates what I do or say. And my family is they really question me. I'm like, what? Why don't you go into medicine? Why don't you go into law? Why don't you be like your sister, be a scientist? I'm like, because I don't want to. Like, you don't have to be defined by your family, by your friends, by the people you're around, but by who you want to become and what you want to do. So, yeah, those are just some of the things that I've experienced here. There's more, but I'll let you guys so, I could go on all day with the things I've experienced, but it's okay. Yeah.
I can go next.
Yeah.
As far as being a teacher here, and I've experienced some of the comments that people say, student-wise too, like, because my name changed. I married my husband and he's Hispanic, so my name is Santian. So they look at me, think I'm Hispanic, or kind of judge based on that, and then I'm a little fluent in Spanish, not as much as Hispanic, but I do know some Spanish, just from being raised around that culture. So they'll say Spanish words, or they'll start speaking Spanish in class, and I'll look over at them, and then they make eye contact with me, and then they're like, wait, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, hey, sometimes it's stuff that they shouldn't be saying. So they know that they know that I understand what they're saying. So they quickly change the subject or stop saying what they're supposed to be saying, or saying what they are saying. Or they'll say comments when they see because I have lots of photos in my classroom, so they'll see my family and my husband, and they'll see, like, he has darker skin and he has tattoos, so they're like, oh, that's your husband, you know, so they just judge based off his skin color that way. Nothing ever too horrible, but they always stereotype me as Hispanic and not. But then that's one of the first things I say in class when I see you guys, or when I meet you guys for the first time. I'm like, okay, my name is Santian. You can say it Santillan or Santian, the correct version. And then I say, well, wait, I'm actually Native American. I'm not Hispanic. My main name's Eagle Shield, and I just kind of go off that spiel. I don't know. I hope to, similar to my coworkers, experience and know that just because you're different race, you can be whatever. You can be interested in art, you can be creative, you can be successful as a person of color, and be sort of a positive influence that way as well. Especially female Hispanics really are, the stay-at-home wives. They take care of everything as far as the family dynamic. So to be a Hispanic, I'm just gonna say that just because I was raised in that culture too.
Yeah, okay, so I've been asked by students, oh, is your husband white? And it's like, why is that relevant? What does that have anything to do with me or who I am as a person? And let me throw that question back at you. Are your parents white? Like, do you ask all your teachers that question? And then ask yourself the question of why. Why don't you ask your other teachers if their husband or wife is white? Oh, it's because they're white, right? And that's something that we don't really think about. We're, like, as someone who has like this special, gift of being born looking completely differently than the people around her, but being raised by the people around her. I mean, Kelsey Norman, South Middle School, Joplin High School. I know what that bubble looks and feels like. I know it because I've lived it. I've lived here my whole life. And so I understand where that question comes from, and it just comes from a place of not knowing, not ever thinking about what it might be like to live in someone else's shoes. Imagine if you lived your life looking completely different from other people, and then on top of that, people assuming things about you because of the way you look automatically. It doesn't matter what you're wearing, it doesn't matter how you speak or hold yourself or what job you have, nothing. Like, it's just the way you look, And so that question comes up a lot. I've been straight up laughed at because they think it's hilarious that an Asian person is teaching Spanish. And I'm like, well, I'm just a human being first. Like, my coloring, I could have been adopted as an Asian person and decided I love Spanish. This has never happened to the other two Spanish teachers, Mr. Butts, Mr. Berkovich. Never, like, Mr. Butts has been around for 7 years now, right? 8 years. And he's never been laughed at for being a Spanish teacher. And yet he and I have the same type of background. We're born in the States, in Missouri. We were born and raised here. We both went abroad. We both have similar educational backgrounds, and yet I'm the one being laughed at because of the way I look, because of my race. And so, and it's not just from, actually I've never been laughed at by a kid, but I've definitely been laughed at by parents. And that's even more rough, because it's just like, it's a totally different type of like generational thing. And so I understand where it comes from, and I know it doesn't come from a place of malice, but at the same time I can see where our society can keep going forward. Instead of judging people by their race and assuming, oh, you must like this, or you must have family that looks like this, we just look at people as humans, and I, like, my very being here is, I hope, a source of inspiration for people, especially for, girls who look like me. I get that aspect too, like, why are you working? Why are you not staying home with your children? But, I can be successful as a woman, and I can be a mother and have a career, Yeah.
Okay.
since I am white and I look white, I use my privilege in my job to make sure that I am inclusive and diverse in all the things that I do. So I've tried to bring in different multicultural activities with the different clubs that I have been involved in. I was the sponsor of book club, so we did a Black History Month event where we came and brought in donations from other people and donated them to a organization here in town that celebrates Black culture. And so I use my privilege in my job to try to, be more, like I said, inclusive. And I haven't really had any issues with my race because not everyone knows that I am half Mexican. And so I just use it sort of as like my secret weapon. When I hear people saying ridiculous things, and they look at me and they're like, oh, you're a white lady, I don't look threatening to them, and they are able to speak in a certain way, I shut them down as often as I can, because I know that, when I was growing up, I had a cross burnt in my yard when I was living in Texas, because my mother is from Mexico and my father is white, and the town that we lived in, they, were staunchly against that. And so I know what that is like, on a personal level, and so that's why I try to influence different things to celebrate a lot of different cultures.
So our third question is, looking forward to the future, where do you see things going? Just in Joplin and just nationwide, really, with race relations and with kind of the treatment of people of color in America, and a little more specifically in American education and American schools?
I don't know. For me, this is something I think about because my husband and I are considering on having children. Well, we want to have kids. And so we think about what that world will look like for our children.
I'm Hispanic, so I was lumped in with Hispanic people in general, and so they just assumed that I knew Spanish, and I dated a Hispanic boy also, so that kind of lumped into that group as well. So they looked at me and automatically assumed that I was Hispanic and I knew Spanish, so I got lumped in with that. But I'm Native American, that's what I identify with. So that's just being different, I guess. Really not just based on looks, being judged just based on appearances, and not really. So then I made sure to tell people that no, my name is Eagle Shield. I'm actually Native American. I'm a Chiricahua Apache, and I identify with that. I'm involved in that tribe, and every year I go down to our annual celebration, and that's something that I involve my family in and my children as well. They're being raised in that culture as well. I like that they identify with both. My son looks very Hispanic as well, and so does my daughter, but I just want them to know that their Native American culture is involved in that as well. So that's why we go down to those celebrations, and I make sure that they participate, and they know the background, and they know why we do the traditions and the dances and the ceremonies that we do, so that they can identify with that. So I did that even when I was growing up in high school. So yeah, just being able to know, and then based on looks, they judged as far as they thought I was something else, and then being different.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my experience sort of mimics Miss Santillan's because I am half Mexican, but I look white, and so I grew up with a lot of Hispanic traditions until I was in foster care. And then I moved around to a lot of different high schools, and when people would realize that I am half Mexican, I was bullied a lot, and I was called graham cracker, which sort of sounds funny, but it was very, it was difficult because I would get that racism thrown at me if they knew I was Hispanic, but then I would hear a lot of racist talk around me because I look white. And so it was a lot of me having to say, you know, you can't talk like that in front of me because, you know, I'm culturally different than you, and this is, you know, this is not accepted. So it was sort of like her experience. But I went to a lot of different schools, but I graduated from Parkview High School in Springfield. And that was a pretty diverse crowd that went to school there. It's sort of in the middle of the city. So I had a lot of different friends and from a lot of different religions, nationalities, ethnicities. So it was cool to have, you know, the backing of multicultural friends with that, but then it was sort of a weird thing to have to combat that racism that was thrown at me from a couple different avenues. So,
You know, you guys do now. It was a little bit different. You know, you couldn't hold hands with a girl of the opposite color in high school. You're like, what are you doing, bro? You know what I mean? So it was different, but for me, it helped by me getting friends and playing sports. It helped me see the world from a different light, honestly.
So the second question we had is going from your high school lives to your lives in high schools as like teachers. How has being in a school like with a makeup like Joplin or in any place you've taught previously, like have you either experienced different treatment from students because of your race, or have you been able to do something that you think you wouldn't be able to as teachers, as educators, because of your position?
Well, I'll talk from my perspective. I think it's a great thing that I'm here. I think the opportunity that I have to be an example or a light to a certain demographic is one of the reasons why I chose to do this and leave HR, where I was at Tamco and Target, to come and teach and coach. So I love it. I think the kids have embraced me. I've embraced them, and it's a great, right now it's a great relationship. So I look at this place as an opportunity, honestly, to give, just shed a different light on, to be quite frank, you don't have to be black and ghetto. You know, you don't have to be black and wear your pants a certain way to fit in, or to act a certain way to fit in. You can be yourself and still be cool, I guess, is the term I can use. So, yeah.
I've never taught anywhere else. I've just stayed in this area. I mean, I've subbed in Thomas Jefferson and, you know, Carthage and all around Joplin. But here, I would say, like, because your question was, how do we see Joplin now as a demographic?
Like how has your like race played into your career as an educator? Have your like, how do you think your like interactions with students have changed because of it, or like compared to like a white teacher in a majority white school?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can only compare it to like my other coworkers, I guess, like my experiences. Like, for example, none of my coworkers ever get asked the question, oh, is your husband white? It's like, why do you ask every one of your teachers that question? Like, why does it matter if my husband's white or not, or Asian?
I don't think we will see the lasting change that we want in this city or this nation until like there's a heart fix with people. Because I think until people truly look at people or other individuals and love them and care about them as just being a human, I think until that happens, I think there's always going to be prejudices. There's always going to be people viewing somebody that may look different.